Hello everybody and welcome back to the Hilltop Pillbox in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Canada. And we're just going through our national strategy videos. And now we're going to take a look at Japan. And Japan has got a lot of fun things to do. We're just going to show you a little bit of info here. Their production is 41, but they only start with $30 on the first round to do purchasing. But you'll see why in a second. And if you look at the order of play, see Germany in the Axis minors, and then Japan before any of the allies get a turn. But if you look at their setup chart, there's a whole lot of stuff the Japanese get. And they have a few very interesting rules which we will spell out for you as time goes along here. The thing about Japan, pardon me folks, sorry I got a little bit of a cough today. The thing about Japan, folks, is that they start at war with China, but that is it. And a lot of things depend on what happens with Germany, but we're going to just talk about China for a second. So China has nationalist China and communist China. Communist China moves and attacks at the same turn that the Soviet Union does, and they're located in these two provinces here. And they only ever make $3, and they can only ever build one infantry unit. They can take other stuff to make some more cash, I guess, but they can only ever build infantry. And so they're never going to become a powerhouse, but they just go to kind of possibly do a can opener move where they'll do an attack first, and nationalist China, who goes a couple of turns later, might be able to exploit a breach in the gap that the communist Chinese made. But we're talking about Japan here. We just got to let you know that they're able to attack communist China without starting a war versus the Soviet Union, just like they are at war with nationalist China, and they're not at war with the Americans, even though there is a bit of an alliance there. Now, Japan has copious amounts of units, of boats especially. They've got a huge navy there, and they've got a decent little fleet there, and a fleet here. And you see here that they're actually starting in the same sea zone as the British. And this sea zone is a tricky one. A lot of people don't realize how big it is. It actually stretches all the way from Hong Kong down to Borneo here. Well, Brunei. Anyway, but excuse me, but it's a long sea zone, and but the Japanese and the British are not at war at the beginning, so they can sit there forever. It's not a big deal. They can come and go, pass through, anything they want without inciting a war. Now, of course, on the British turn, they could say, "Hey, we're going to attack Japan." Not a good move. That's they just don't have enough stuff. Just a very quick glance at what they have in the Far East tells you that they just don't have much. They've got 5 men. That's all they got, a couple of boats. And they're going to have their own problems over in Africa that they might have to deal with. There are a couple more men in Singapore, but they're a little trapped because they're versus Siam, which is basically a Japanese territory. So the Japanese have got options here. A lot of troops. A lot of transports. They start with 6 transports and lots of guys to move off the island, off of these islands down here in Hainan. And in the Carolines, they even have some boats, a couple of subs in the Marshalls, and then a destroyer and a sub in the Caroline. So lots of stuff, very well spread out, and they're pushing their way around the Pacific fairly unimpeded, because they're not at war with the British or the Americans to start the game, so they can move around. Now, the interesting thing is the Dutch. If Germany doesn't do anything about the Dutch on the first round, they don't invade Holland, then all of these boats here will probably scurry down and join Anzac down here, and they'll remain as Dutch boats. But more often than not, Holland gets taken over and they get rolled for and divvied up between Japan, Anzac, and the bottom of the Pacific as to whether or not they get taken or scuttled. So there's really nothing stopping the Japanese from just romping around. The Japanese, though, on the mainland, if we do take a closer look here, they really don't have that much stuff facing the Chinese. In fact, the Chinese outnumber them about 3 to 1 in infantry to start the game. So what the Japanese typically do is they will do some attacks right on the shoreline. Kwang Tung here has 4 men and an anti-aircraft gun, and Kwang Si has 2 men. So that usually falls right off the bat. And then these two, Hunan and is this Peking up here? No, Shenxi. Sorry, Peking is way up there. Shenxi, they usually fall. Those 4 territories usually fall from a combination of attacks with the men and the planes. And you'll notice that the men here and some of the planes are a bright red color. Those are veteran troops. These are troops that cannot be purchased during the game, and when they die, that's it. They cannot be replaced in any way, shape, or form. So you tend to watch them and try to keep them alive. They attack at a 4 in this game on this D12 set game, and they'll attack at a 5 when they have an artillery. The artillery itself only attacks at a 3, so that's a pretty big jump. And Japanese tanks only attack at a 5. So these infantry, these veteran infantry, have quite a punch. Other troops that have a punch are the Special Naval Landing Force, and Japan starts with 3 of them. Alright, as well as some more veteran troops. And the fighters that they have here, they have 5 veteran fighter wings, squadrons if you will, that can fly around. They pack an awful lot of a punch too, and instead of attacking at a typical 6, they attack at an 8, which is pretty good. They can do pretty well. The problem with the veteran fighter, though, pardon me, is that you again cannot purchase more. And once they're gone, they're gone, and there's only 5, so you got to be careful with how you use them. The Japanese also have some special units here, and I know that guys out there, Sired Blood and General Hand Grenade, Der Künstler, and some other people have done some amazing things with their painting. If I've missed off great painters, I apologize. Those 3 came to mind here as I'm just standing here. But you see I've got some pretty rudimentary paint jobs going on here. You can see the 2 different types of aircraft. On the front you got your naval torpedo or dive bombers. It's a dual purpose plane. And they attack at a 7. And the neat thing about them is that if they hit on a 4 or less, they get to choose the target they're hitting. So that can really be important if you've got you're fighting a big naval battle and somebody takes a hit on a battleship just so they can absorb one, and then this plane gets another hit. You can target the battleship and sink it that round. So that's pretty handy. Naval fighters are similar to that, and they roll on a 6 or less. The naval fighters are the orange ones here with the red stripes, and if they hit on a 1, if they get a 1, they get to choose their targets as well. Now these cost a little bit more. They cost 11 for the fighter and 12 for the dual-purpose torpedo dive bomber, but they can be worth it. They can give you that little punch that you need, that little surgical strike that the other planes do not allow. So now that you've seen some of the special units, I guess the Special Naval Landing Force, I didn't really talk about them too much. These guys here sitting here, we start with 3 and usually build a couple every turn with Japan, is they get a +1 on the, I believe it's the first round of combat when they attack. So they're, I guess it's during all amphibious assaults. So if you're landing a couple here right off the bat in, I think it's Kwang Tung, where there's 4, all your naval infantry there are going to attack at a 3 instead of a 2 on the D12. A little bit of extra punch, nothing huge, but it's amazing how many 3s you roll when you only need a 2, right? That's it's just the way it goes. The status of Japan with the Soviet Union is they are at peace. There is no battling going on, no warfare. And the Russians really don't want that. Neither side has a lot of stuff up here, but Japan can certainly bring it faster. Typically, in Peking, they would build a factory, and also in Shanghai. And then once they get down here into Saigon, they would build another one. Which brings us to another point. If you've watched the German video, when Germany takes Paris, you just stop everything you're doing and you roll for the Vichy or Free French territories. So you roll a die, and on a 1 to 6, the formerly French colonial territory will become Vichy, and a 7 to 12 it becomes Free French. So French Indochina here, worth 1, and Saigon, worth 3, are 2 separate rolls. And if they are Vichy, they actually just become Japanese territories. You just put a Japanese roundel on there, and done and done. And in this game, though, I know in 40 the Chinese can't really move around too much. In this game, the Chinese can actually come down to Saigon. So the Japanese tend to have to land some people in French Indochina just to stave off a Chinese incursion. Siam is another neat little country here. They are pro-Japanese in the extreme. So on round 2, or any time after round 2, the Japanese can land troops in Siam and take control of it. And it's worth $3. Plus Siam, every turn will make 1 infantry with that $3 for themselves. So Japan kind of double dips with Siam the same way the Germans double dip with their Axis miners in Europe. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but over 5-6 rounds, that's 5 or 6 free infantry and an extra $15-18 for Japan. Whereas Far East Command gets no such bonuses. It's got to be pretty aware of that. So those are the Japanese options for just scooping up some free territory. But as far as warfare goes, we'll just start at the top. They can go ahead and attack Vladivostok if they want. There is a coastal gun there, so if they attack from the sea, the coastal gun gets some shots at them first, some freebies. Helps defend. But typically they would just want to attack across the land. Now there is no Mongolian rule in this game. All of the powers and the out-of-box rules, they are all independent of each other. If one goes pro-Axis, the whole board does not go pro-Axis. But they're typically not that worth it as far as money goes. So if we even just take a quick look here, you got Saudi Arabia as a strict neutral. It's worth a couple. And if we come down into Africa, you have places like Mozambique and the Belgian Congo and Angola and whatnot. And there's a few around. Turkey is a tough nut to crack, so is Spain and Sweden. But with Japan, Japan doesn't really want to mess it up with Mongolia. There's just no reason for it. Now if Russia wants to, go ahead. You know, they can go ahead and mess with things and spend time, money, and energy here. It's not recommended though, because they're going to have a world of hurt coming down on them in the form of the German army, of course. The Wehrmacht comes across pretty hot and heavy for getting to Moscow, and Novosibirsk is the only chance the Russians have. We'll cover that in another video, but they don't want to wreck the border that they have with Mongolia. It's a nice buffer for them. So Japan typically leaves the Russians alone. Now, Communist China, on the other hand, Japan could go in there on round 1, okay, and try to attack them. Now, again, these are veteran troops, so, you know, if the Communists get a couple of, you know, easy hits or whatever, you can kill a couple of veteran troops right off the bat, and that would be a little disconcerting. It is tougher for the Japanese to get troops inland, and you can see it's pretty bare. It's pretty bare there. When I first set up this map, last year when I got it, I set it up and I thought, shoot, there sure aren't a lot of things to start over here. I thought maybe I read it wrong, but this is how it is. and then Japan just has to ferry a bunch of guys over and put them in these places and then let them go. But that keeps your options open. Again, you're at war with nationalist China, so you should bang into them as much as you can. But then your real choices come in the form of, do I go after Hong Kong? Do I go after the Philippines? Is there a J1 attack in this game? Well, there is. There is a J1 attack, and you have 2 transports here, you have 2 transports here, and you have 2 transports there. And you can definitely take those transports and come down here and start taking money islands. You can take Hong Kong. You can come down and take Singapore if you want. All these islands here are pretty easy pickings. Not a lot defending them. Again, you could get some free boats from the Dutch. You just never know what's going to go on there. Here's the deal though. Of course, if you attack the Philippines, America is right into the war. If you attack Anzac or Far East Command, then that adds $25 to the American race to 80. They're trying to get to $80 in their income, and we'll talk about that on the American turn. But essentially, they just roll 2d12s every turn and add that to whatever number they had at the beginning, and they just keep adding and adding and adding until they get to 80. And every time the Axis get aggressive, it just adds a bonus to the American dice. So France gives them a +5 because it's kind of inevitable. But any Japanese attack on anything besides Chinese, either communist or then it's adding to the American numbers and brings them in more quickly. So some Japanese players tend to just focus on China, and they pick up the French Indochina and pick up Saigon, and they punch through and they beat up communist China right at the beginning just so they can erase them out of the game in about 3 rounds, which I've seen lots. They're not a huge threat, folks, but they can just be that annoying little mosquito buzzing around, especially in the north where the Japanese don't have much stuff, and they can cause you to divert resources that could otherwise be served going south to Calcutta. You could just focus on nationalist China and communist China. And I've seen that. I've seen people do that until they've wiped out this whole area, and then they turn their attention down towards Calcutta. By then, Calcutta tends to have quite the stack of troops, because if they can go unimpeded onto these Dutch islands, well, things might not turn out so well. All right. Now, with the Japanese, if they take these transports here and they go 1, 2, and they come down and take Sumatra and Borneo, and they can even take Java, and I think they can do all of that before anybody else can get there. So they can take all of those and not start a war with anybody, because all of this is Holland and it doesn't have any effect on the game. So it's just free territory at that point. So Japan can do that. Come down here and get the money islands, and they do get a big bonus if they have all of the Dutch East Indies, and that is all of them. So that's Dutch New Guinea. It's all the orange islands here. Okay, so there's 6 of them in this game, and if they have all 6, they get a +5. But these countries themselves are worth 16, I believe. 3, 5, 8. Yeah, so they're worth 16 on their own. If they get them all, that's +5. So it's worth $21 to them. That's usually a larger economy than Far East Command or Anzac will have by that point. Maybe then both of them will have. So it is definitely something that the Japanese could shoot for. The other thing the Japanese can do is utilize their sneak attack. Now, the sneak attack the Japanese can do is absolutely devastating. They can do 3 attacks. They point out 3 different places they're going to do a sneak attack. And on that turn, the people they are sneak attacking for the first round of combat do not get to return fire. So it is a big freebie fest, And so that's how you take Sumatra and Java and Celebes. If you don't want to start a war, but you want to get into these things here, you can use it for that. Also, when Japan declares that, they get $35 bang right off the bat, just for declaring their sneak attack. Okay, and they have to do it before or by the by the start of turn 7. Pardon me. They have to use it. If they don't, they forfeit it. All right. So as long as these people that they declare the sneak attack with are not at war with them, off they go. Okay? And the neat thing is after they have done it, they've done their sneak attack. So let's say we load up a couple of infantry onto the transport and come down to Sumatra and they kill these guys and take over the island. Then they can actually use a non-combat movement. So they can load back onto the transport and just head back home. So anybody involved, any ground units involved in a sneak attack, get a special non-combat move after the sneak attack. So although the Japanese may look out of position when they do all their sneak attacks, everybody can be right back where they need to be at the end of it. Devastating if it's done with the hands of a master, and I know some guys that are really good at this. I don't know if James and Joel want me to say their names, but there they go. Absolute masters with Japan. I was playing Japan one time and kind of spinning my wheels a little bit because I'm a little gun shy sometimes when it comes to these games, because dice really hate me. I don't know. I'm not afraid to say it, but dice, they see me coming and they just start laughing. And that one game I was playing, and I trying to get some tips from Joel as to what I could do better, and he says, just start taking islands. He says it's all about the money. Go get your economy and crush theirs. And as soon as I started doing that, the game turned around and we won. So, I mean, it took like 15 hours, but once Japan gets rolling, things go well. It's kind of like Young Grasshopper says in an old Japanese strategy video, a rich Japan is a happy Japan. Well, couldn't be more true in this game either, because their economy is 41 at the start, which sounds pretty good. A lot of that's going to be poured into naval units trying to get things onto the mainland and building factories on the mainland just to get things going. So you're not going to be putting a lot of actual fighting units down in the first couple of rounds. Most of it's going to be naval and production units. Alright, what else did I want to chat about? Well, again, the big thing is this stuff here. You might not have to fight over. It might be Japanese already and you just go in on a non-com. And if it isn't, if it's free French, well, you just head on in as well. Again, this is the out-of-box setup. You may have noticed if you watched my gameplay video that there were some guys, and I think I put in a coastal gun in Saigon and a couple of guys in French Indochina, just to simulate that there would be resistance to the Japanese moving in. It wouldn't be much, but there'd be some. And I like that idea, but this is the setup from the rules. But with this many pieces on the board, adding 3 or 4 infantry here and there just to you know, cause a little bit of grief, I think that's worth it. And if they're Vichy, if they become Vichy, they actually just stay where they are. They're Japanese territory, but they'd be Vichy troops, and so they can't be used in an offensive role. So that's okay. They're not going to cause any grief. The other devastating thing I'm going to talk about with the Japanese is our good friends, the Americans. I was playing a game of this a little while ago, and what happened was I ended up having, down here in the Carolines, I had built a small fleet of destroyers and subs. It's all that was in it, was destroyers and subs. And I think I had 14 ships altogether. And the guy who was playing the US was someone who hadn't really played before, so I told him, you know, when you see me building up a fleet, get your American fleet out of here. So he saw the 14 ships here, and it didn't really look to him like it was a big deal, and it really wasn't. I mean, it's all destroyers and subs. You're shooting at 4s. But here's the thing. He brought everything out here, and it was the most unbelievable rolling you've ever seen. Now, in the first place, like I said, Japan gets its free roll. free attack, because I used the sneak attack on the naval units in the Hawaiian Islands, and so I had my 14 troops go up there, units go up there and fire. It was pretty devastating. I sank a few things and damaged the carriers and damaged the battleships. But then on the next, for the rest of the battle, American ships, not the planes mind you, but the American ships were all -2 to their dice, or to what they need to roll. So for instance, if a destroyer needs to roll a 4, now it needs to roll a 2 or a 1 in order to get a hit. And he had 11 units, and he didn't get a single hit. Extremely devastating, because he had parked his entire navy here. So there was nothing left of an American fleet in the Pacific. And that was pretty much the game at that point for America. They just decided to build stuff in the east and hopefully go get rid of the Krauts. Because there's nothing they were going to do against the Japanese. And at that point, when Japan does not have to worry about an American fleet, it's game over for the rest of the poor suckers in the Pacific. The Americans really are their only hope, especially when Japan has all the money islands. Anzac just simply cannot, even if they're getting their bonuses and whatnot, Anzac just simply cannot compete with a strong Japan. And Calcutta's got her own problems. As we all know, the Japanese, if they don't have to worry about an American fleet, they're going to build nothing but fast units and planes and come down here and just smoke everything that these guys can possibly build. And China will not be long for this world in that sense. So if you are America, and I'll cover it on the American thing as well, you know what? Get the heck out of Hawaiian Islands if anything is within range of you, because the Japanese might even have, you know, just these 4 boats and say, you know what, that's good enough. We'll have 4 4s and he can't shoot back and everything is shooting at a -2. Yeah, why not? We'll give it a whirl. So there are some things to watch out for in this game, and that is one of them. The Japanese sneak attack, just absolutely devastating, utterly devastating. Now, something you do need to know is that, for instance, let's say the Japanese are going to do a sneak attack, and we'll just sit a destroyer here. They're going to do a sneak attack on Singapore, and they bring units into this sea zone to do an amphibious assault. Well, they have the sneak attack is going to happen here. Okay? The sneak attack is only here. This is a sneak attack. All right? And then it says a second sneak attack can be used for the ground forces to sneak attack. Okay, so this could be 1 sneak attack, and then this would be 2. Okay, but you can't attack them normally and then attack the ground with a sneak attack. Obviously, once you're blowing up their navy, they kind of know you're coming. Not much of a sneak attack opportunity left. So essentially, the sneak attack you can use in conjunction, but then you have to burn 2 sneak attacks, one for the naval attack and one for the ground attack. That's following right on the heels of it. So typically, the Japanese will typically go after the money islands with that sneak attack. Again, the sneak attack does not work on China because they're already at war with China. I'll just mention the Banzai Markers. You have your Banzai Markers, and you have 3 of them. And those bad boys can go with any of your normal infantry. So these orange guys here, not the veterans. The Banzai will add +1 to your attack. So they draw their swords and charge, and they're ferocious, but they better win. Because when you Banzai, those troops cannot retreat. They are in for the count. So they are committed. But that's kind of fun. And you can use 3 of them per turn, and you can use 2 of them per attack. So you can never have an attack with more than 2 of the Banzai, but you could use 1 in 3 different attacks if you'd like. That's how they divvy those up. You have some options with Japan. A myriad of options. Something I highly recommend is building a naval base in the Marianas Islands. Okay, I highly recommend that. For the simple reason then that you can shunt back and forth between Japan, the Marianas, Caroline, the Philippines, and probably some of your money islands. So you get naval bases on all of those, and things will be going pretty well. Then you've got your Tokyo Express going, and you can support your troops wherever they are. America, on the other hand, has a lot of trouble with that. Again, they've got two fronts to fight on. Plus, if they start building naval bases here, Japan's probably going to hop on 4 or 5 transports, come on over and just thank you very much, and just take the base. Another thing Japan really wants to do is take these islands and put things on them. So take Guam, put guys here, put guys on Wake, you know, load up some of these little islands here so the Americans can't just simply come by and drop guys off. A troop here and a troop there is not a huge deal to the Japanese. Have lots of transports. I recommend having about 10 to 15 transports as the game goes on. And that will allow you the flexibility you need to support your troops and to move things to a troubled spot in a big hurry if you need to. One thing I'll mention on this thing is the Scorched Earth policy. Scorched Earth is if you have owned a facility from the beginning of your turn, you can get rid of it. So for instance, we look at Hong Kong, and Hong Kong's got a couple of naval ports. Now why are there two? Because, oops, sorry for the shake there. Why are there two? Well, one is in that sea zone, one is in that sea zone. So if your boats start where the British boats are, they can move 3 from there. And if they were on the other side of the line, up in 106, they could do 3 as well. Now remember, if Japan takes that, they keep both those ports, and boy are they able to move around from there, because 3 gets you 1 and 2, 3. You can also go 1, 2, 3, and all of these get you within striking distance of Calcutta, and the British have a tough time keeping you out of India. So what the Scorched Earth policy lets you do is that if you have had these, so if Britain gets to her turn and she is not at war with the Japanese, she has got to Zorch those naval bases. So UK player, the FEC, Far East Command, India, whatever you want to call it, whoever's got the Union Jack symbol on their sheets, you have got to get rid of those 2 naval bases. If you don't, the Japanese are going to use them to kill you. So you want to get rid of them. Another thing that you might want to think about is there's a naval base in Dutch New Guinea, and there's an air base in New Guinea, and then there's the naval base here, and even Anzac. It's not an Anzac thing, but there's 2 naval bases here, and then India also has 2 naval bases in Madras, one for each of the sea zones on east and west of the subcontinent. All of those could certainly be destroyed because you don't want them falling into the hands of the Japanese. But just food for thought. Japan, again, may not attack you for a long time. They may say, hey, we're just, you know, a kind of gentle Japan. You know, could happen. But if not, they can really take it to you. And that makes Hawaii a very tempting target with a naval base, an air base, and it's a victory city. And if Japan can get enough stuff within range of the American fleet, be it here or on the American coast, things might not end well. And the way they do that is by building, and if you're Japanese, this is a heck of a move, you build a naval base in the Marshall Islands. And then what you do is you have your access up the coast to destroy the fleet there and then come back and destroy it in Hawaii. And it's very difficult early in the game for America to answer that. So America, if you see Japan getting her fleet and bringing her battle wagons, her subs and everything, and bringing them down to the Marshalls, you definitely want to maybe take a step back from the west coast and move up towards British Columbia. Come to Vancouver, it's nice this time of year, and you might save your bacon there. But this is really dangerous, folks. I can't stress this enough. If America loses her fleet, you know, she's going to be making $100 on her first turn, and every turn after, she's right around $100 for the whole game. Sounds like a lot of money, but when you have to rebuild a fleet, that money just doesn't go that far. Especially when the Japanese are making probably 70 to 80 to 90 bucks at the same time, and they've already got a huge fleet. So very tough to come back from that huge uphill climb. So just keep that in mind if you're America. But if you're Japan, heck of a move. Build a naval base in the Marshalls. Really put the squeeze on them. You can also do something more subtle. You can put a naval base on Iwo Jima or Benin. Same thing. And that'll get you 3 spaces to America. Now you might be saying, well, can't America just put up blockers? Well, America has a lot of rules that keep it from doing certain things. America can only have ships that begin and end next to American territory until it's at war. So, for instance, you have a destroyer right here. And if it wants to move, it can move 3 because it has a port. So it can move 1, 2, 3 and go to Guam. Way over to Guam. And then it can go 3 more. And it can get over to Hawaii. So in 2 turns it could be in Hawaii just in time to get sunk by the Japanese. But it cannot go to any sea zones that have Japanese islands in them. Alright? Cannot stop beside anything with Japanese symbols on it. So, yeah, and they can't go to open water. So, I guess they can go to the to this coastal spot here. But they can't go to open water. They can't go to their convoy zones there. And they have a convoy zone down here as well. They can't go to those. And they have a convoy zone here. They have to be beside American coastline. So they're pretty hampered as to where they can go. And again, folks, with that first attack, that sneak attack, you know, the Japanese can roam around anywhere they want, just get into position and then thump you. So be very, very wary of that. Highly recommend splitting up your fleet if you see the Japanese coming. Make them use all their sneak attacks and split up your fleet into like 6 zones if you can. That way they can't sink the whole lot real easily. But Japan, you have tons of options. How you use them, obviously up to you. It's highly recommended that you do take out China. If China does not get taken out early, they could be making 15, 16 bucks a round. They get +5 for the Burma Road in this game. And just like other games, as soon as you're at war with, as soon as Japan's at war with Far East Command, they can send stuff up into China to help maintain the Burma Road. And so the Japanese could find themselves facing the sad fact that they have got to crank out a whole bunch of stuff out of their factories instead of sending it over to fight the American fleet. And as much money as you have, Japan, you can't fight everywhere all the time. You do have to discriminate a little bit as to where you're going to go. Well, I think that's it for Japan. Sorry if I rambled a bit. That's bound to happen sometimes with the Japanese. They have so many options, so many things they can do. The very last thing I'll mention is the Kamikaze. It's a little different from 40. In 40 you have those sea zones that have a Kamikaze, and you have 6 of them that you could use free of charge. In this game, the Kamikaze is something that only happens starting on turn 10. And on turn 10, the Japanese can then just fly fighters, and that's it, just fighters. And they can move maximum range and they can ignore the return. Okay, the requirement to return. And they hit on an 8 or less. So that's a pretty good deal. So if Japan's been able to build up some fighters, you got naval fighters, you can build regular fighters. So not the bombers, okay, not the torpedo bombers and dive bombers, but just the fighters, and not veterans. They're too smart for this. But you can go and just send your planes out the maximum distance and start landing into the sides of ships. and you hit on an 8 or less again, right? So, you know, 2 fighters could quite easily take out a battleship or a carrier. So it's actually a really good deterrent to the Americans when they're coming in. If you've got 7 or 8 fighters sitting on Japan at the time, you can wreak a lot of havoc. And you do start with, I think you got 1-0 in Tokyo there. So you can have some fun with him. Starting on turn 10 though. And if you're using Kamikaze, it's either because you got money to burn, or you're using them because the noose is tightening and it's desperation time. So, interesting rule set though for that. I like that, that you actually have to sacrifice a fighter. I do like that. But you can do as many as you want. They just fly out to their maximum range. So again, if you're wondering how far that is, that's 5. So they can go 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello, Hawaii. So something to keep in mind if you're Japanese, and also if you're the Americans, but we'll cover you guys on another video. Thanks for watching, folks. And again, this is just the out-of-box rules. There's a lot of other things that can go on. If you want to look at some of the neat things Japan can do with POW camps and fortifications and things like that, please check out my other video on the special units and facilities on my channel here, and it'll give you a little bit more information. And you can build your mottos. Those are fun. Alright, folks, thanks so much for taking the time to watch. Take care. May the dice be with you. Bye-bye.